Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to see so many of you here today with us on this beautiful sunny morning. I wanted to say Sunday morning, but it's not, Friday. It's almost the weekend. My name is Katja. I'm the host of Creative Mornings Munich. And yeah, I welcome you all here. Before we start, with a quick show of hands, for whom is Creative Mornings for whom is it the first time to be here today? Wow, many of you, welcome. And to all those who've already been to our event, welcome back. We will start with a really creative session on the topic of muse. But before we go even a little bit deeper, I will say a few words about Creative Mornings for those who don't know the concept yet. And then we will dive deep into the topic. So, Creative Morning is a concept that originates from New York, from the US, and it started over 10 years ago. And today, it's present in over 200 chapters, 200 cities around the world. And the concept is that once a month, we all speak on the same topic. Topics change on a monthly basis. So it's really interesting to see how different chapters tackle the same topic in a different way. We are over 20,000 attendees every month, and we're growing all the time, so I'm very happy as well to see many new faces in here. Be invited to invite your friends to join us for any next session so that we create even a bigger creative community here in Munich. Today, the location is hosted by Tuesday, a co-working space that I would like Cecilia to join me here for a few moments and just introduce you to the concept of Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm trying to clarify you guys why you're here. Sounds like a quite weird concept for a co-working space. So it's actually what we do. We take places that during the day are completely closed, such a beautiful restaurant, so thank you so much also for the honor for being here. We take them and we turn it into really diverse and inspiring co-working spaces. This allows us to offer a service which is way cheaper than any other co-working space. We run on 80 per month or 10 per day, so you can also drop in to do also events. So everything is like a normal co-working with community and vibes, and also for you to drop in different places in the city. At the moment, we're just in Munich. We have 2 spaces, actually 3 opening in the next week. So if you guys are welcome to join us for a day or for a month, whenever you want, and I welcome you for this super nice session, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you also to Nico Riva, our photographer, who's been with us for a while and is trying to spread the word through photos. And then we also have One Wave Studio and Marco who are here today filming the whole event so that also other people around the world can have a look at what the session is going to be about. We are a team of volunteers, and we love to organize those events on a monthly basis. We all the time switch locations, look for inspiring speakers. We are always looking for new people to join us, so in case you would like to become part of the organization team, just look at the organizers with the text. We're especially looking for photographers and videographers, but anyone is welcome, so don't hesitate to stop by. Now, with no further ado, the topic of this month is muse, and I'm truly excited about it because Creative Mornings and muse and inspiration is something that just fits so well perfectly together. I'm very excited to have Dom here today with us. Dom is a very, very interesting and deep person. So if you actually get the chance to talk to him a little bit afterwards, or if you may have already talked to him before the event started, you may have realized that he is an artist, he does music, he plays several instruments, but not even that, like he's into sports, he has been places, he has lived in different countries, and all those great experiences have made him the wonderful person he is today. And he's on top of this a brand manager, and I'm pretty sure that he has really great talk lined up for us. So Dom, I will leave you the stage. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I told Katja to keep it short and sweet. This was not short and sweet. This was very high. So, but thank you. Also, thanks to the Creative Mornings team. You guys been awesome. My talk today is about muse, and as Katja said, it's a fit, right? if you think about inspiration and muse and creative, it sort of goes together. And I would like to take a closer look at this topic today with you. And since so many people came, I figured it might be a really good idea to set myself a goal, but also to share that goal with you. So my goal for today's session is to inspire you. But I'd like to take it a little further. I'd like to inspire you to inspire others. And before we get into the talk, and I will talk briefly about the structure so you know what to expect, I'd like to take a few moments to talk a little bit about me and why I think inspiration is something so critical for us. And for me, inspiration started actually when I was very young. And I was born in that time. And if you take a look, this was probably the most creative, weird, amazing time. Going into the 90s, I would say, like 92, 93. And it sort of went a little another route. But if you take a look, is there anything that sort of stands out for you? Anything that you can relate to?
Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan. Thank you. Exactly. Who else? E.T.
Michael Jackson.
Exactly. Say again? The Turtles. Exactly. It's Donatello, by the way. What else? Back to the Future. There's Yoda, breakdancing, Freddy Krueger. Do you see Prince? It's insane. Like, just think about the characters that they've built. This was like, it was very different than it is today. And a few weeks ago, my dad came to my house and he brought all my paintings from when I was younger. He actually collected all of them. And you said Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was also, for me, he was my hero. So I drew him. And if you think about these characters, like they invented characters with the colors, the way they acted, the way they did it in the ring. I don't know how many of you were into wrestling at that time. I was huge fan. Bushwhackers. You know this one? Does anyone know the name? No? Close? Ultimate Warrior, that's it. But close. I mean, just look how over this guy is. The teeth, you know, the muscles, the neon colors. And at that time when I drew them, what I figured was really interesting because, you know, like I started to play around with the colors and I started to draw them differently. I sometimes, you know, changed the way they dressed up. And I went really crazy with this. That's the British Bulldog. You can see it by the colors. I thought he was amazing. I wanted to have the same hair as he did, but at least it didn't work out until today. But you know this guy? Undertaker, exactly. But my absolute favorite was this guy. It's called Bret the Hitman Hart. And you can sort of see like the colors, they're a bit weird. They called him the pink and black attack. I loved it. And my first day of school, when my first day of school approached, my parents took me to get a backpack, and I picked the pink one. And I went to school, and all the guys were laughing at me and saying, "Why is he wearing a pink?" I'm like, "You have no idea what you're talking about." No idea. Because this was my hero. So 30 years fast forward, I'm still into creative and I'm still in the creative business. I then joined Amazon as a creative director. And what was interesting about Amazon was we were the creative unit that sort of worked with all the brands that wanted to advertise on the Amazon space. And the good thing about it was that we got to work with so many different brands. I mean, this is just a tiny portion of it. I actually counted it. I could count it because there was all these folders on my MacBook, but it was 300, and I consider myself very, very lucky to have worked with so many. But just take a moment and think of how different a BMW and a Nike is. from their products to the way they do the external communication. And then take, for instance, a Disney and a classical brand like Nivea. I found that very inspiring, and I also had to inspire them to do bigger things at Amazon, and I will talk about that a little later. So the structure of my presentation, I figured, should be very simple. The subject today is muse. I want to talk to you about muse and inspiration, and I'll take a moment to define what muse and what inspiration is. Then I'd like to talk to you about how we get inspired. I'd like to show you a few techniques that worked for me and for my teams. And then I also like to talk to you about the why we should get inspired, or why we should inspire others. So when we talk about the what, I took a deeper look and I actually looked up the definition. And muse is the source of inspiration. I'm like, yep, that makes sense. I figured if I stand here 30 minutes and talking to you only about sources of inspiration, it might be a little boring. So I took a closer look at inspiration. And when I looked it up, I kind of got a little, like a weird kind of definition. I'm reading it out, but it's weird. It's like the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially to do something creative. Yep. And we think about inspiration like we kind of know what it is, right? But there's I figured this one is way better. It's a sudden, brilliant, or timely idea. And to get us a better understanding of what inspiration is, I figured we'd take a look at our working processes. So our work process is always, it starts with a beginning, and goes to a result, right? You have several steps in there, some longer, some less long. But in the end, that's sort of like the core essence to that. I want to talk to you about the creative process, and I think it's a bit different. And before I do that, I would like to ask you, how many of you do work in a creative environment or in a creative job? Can you raise your hand real quick? No surprise. Creative Mornings. So I hope the process that I'm going to outline today is something you can relate to. So the creative process also has a beginning and has a result. Slightly different, I think. Bear with me. I think it all starts with an idea, right? We can relate to that. What usually happens after you have an idea, come to the realization that the idea sucks. Pretty much every time. Like, I can't think of my first idea being like, yep, I got it. Nope, never works. Never works. It gets painful because you can be like, nah, I might be onto something. It's even worse. Up and down, up and down. And then you have another up because you'd be like, yep, I think I got it. And you're really convinced that this is the idea. And then what happens? You go to the creative review and your creative director just chops it down. And you're back at square one. You'd be like, oh man. So have a little up, you'd be like, yep, now I got it. And then something happens that I call the panic phase. This is, I hate my life. How many of you can relate to that? All right, thank you. Thank you. That would have been weird if not, but then something happens. And I think inspiration has something to do with this. It boosts us up. This happens. It's this ingenious, late idea. It's mostly late, right? You have it a few hours before the client presentation. You'd be like, yep, hey, I got it. And you're the only one doing this. All the others are doing, oh my God, we need to. But that actually is super interesting when it comes to understanding what inspiration is. And I think we've all lived through this. And these are highs and lows. There's nothing in between. So I think in a certain sense, we as creatives, we're also a bit of extreme. So we understand the what it is. We understand what it is in the creative process. And I would like to take a few moments to talk to you about the how we get inspired. Again, these are a few techniques that worked for me, and Let's have a conversation if you, if you want to jump on that. But I also feel that everything always starts with the idea. And to have an idea, it works for everyone differently. Some might have it on a desk. I rarely have ideas on my desk. I don't know, maybe it's because of all the processes and all the other stuff that I need to handle, but ideas for me, I know it's a bit thin, but that's where I get mine. I like to take walks, and especially in the forest, if I'm lucky enough to be close by, and I think I figured out why I get creative in the forest, it's because when I walk and I really listen to what's going on, and I listen to like my feet touching the ground, like when they cracked a little, the little wooden sticks, when you hear the, like the stone being moved. Sometimes you hear the wind. Usually, I think I can unplug my brain so I allow other ideas to come in, but everyone is different, so I would encourage everyone to find their source of inspiration, their source of ideas by just trying it out. I worked with creatives, they had to go to markets. He was like, whenever I go to a market, I get ideas. So I was like, all right, go on a market. And when people asked, where is he? I was like, yeah, he's working. I found a really cool video from David Lynch, who's a very famous Hollywood director who has very creative and sometimes a bit weird videos. And I'd like to show you a little piece of that where he talks about ideas.
Everything that we do starts with an idea. We don't know what to do unless we have an idea. So ideas are like fish. And you don't make the fish, you catch the fish. You desiring an idea is like putting a bait on a hook and lowering it into the water. You can catch ideas from daydreaming, or you can catch ideas from places. If you think that maybe a place could conjure ideas, then you have to go out of the house and go traveling. You could be going down the street, see a reflection on a little pool in the gutter, and bang, an idea would come. Who knows how it happens?
It's a really interesting video. It's a bit longer. I think it's a few minutes. I encourage you, if you're interested, just look it up on YouTube, David Lynch on creativity. And I think the core essence, what he's saying, is like go out and find the ideas, let them come to you, and look closely and allow them to happen. And they can come anywhere, and everyone is different. And especially if you're a creative leader, make sure to enable the people that work for you or work with you to find their source of inspiration. I think in order to get inspired, you should try to think differently. Thinking differently is important because if you would solve your problems always the same way you solve them, I don't think you would come into to a creative, innovative idea. And I found a really interesting example, and I hope you don't know about this because it's about these two people. You know them, right? Andrew Agassi and, of course, it's Boris. Who's a tennis fan here? You are? Becker's serve was out of this world. Agassi couldn't beat him. Whatever he did, he couldn't beat these serves. 3 times in a row, Becker beat him. And Agassi, whenever, like first impression, like the first thing he did, he went on the court and he just trained and trained and trained to get even better. He still couldn't beat him. Becker was just better. So he had to think differently. And what he found was super interesting. I hear you laughing because you know the story, right? He saw something that no one else saw, and you're about to see it. Take a look. I have a video of him talking about this like 20 years after. It's short, but let's take a look because I think he explains it quite well.
Boris Becker, for example, who beat me the first 3 times we played because his serve was something, a game I'd never seen before. Well, I watched tape after tape of him and stood across the net from him 3 different times, and I started to realize he had this weird tick with his tongue. I'm not kidding. He would go into his his rocking motion, his same routine. And just as he was about to toss the ball, he would stick his tongue out, and it would either be right in the middle of his lip, or it would be to the left corner. So if he's serving in the deuce court, and he put his tongue in the middle of his lip, he was either serving up the middle or to the body. But if you put it to the side, he was going to serve out wide. The hardest part wasn't returning a serve. The hardest part was not letting him know that I knew this. Resist the temptation of reading his serve for the majority of the match and choose the moments when I was going to use that information on a given point to execute a shot that would allow me to break the match open.
I think he actually thought differently a couple of times, right? The first time to understand, man, this guy's doing something weird with his tongue. But the other time when he thought differently, it was like he would not use that advantage right on the spot. He would pick the times where he uses the advantage to actually beat him. And the video goes on because he actually then goes on and telling Becker on Oktoberfest, what a coincidence, how he beat him. And he had no idea. And he was like, oh man, I thought you could read my mind. I was like, no. Failing. Failing is interesting, especially in our culture. And by the way, this guy is falling off a wakeboard. He's not doing a stunt. But failing, for us Germans, I don't know how many Germans we have in the audience. I'm sure there's a few. We're in Munich. Failing is something from a cultural perspective we usually don't do. Just take a second and think about like your time at school. Failing was not something that was fostered or that was, that was encouraged. But without failing, we're not going to get to the creative options or the creative ideas that we want. And I would like to back this up with a few examples, like inventions for mankind that were found only by mistake. Does anyone know the story of the microwave, how it was invented? It's hilarious. The guy worked on a radar experiment, and he stepped into the field, and all of a sudden, he had a little sensation in his pants because he had a chocolate bar in his hand, in his pants, and it started to melt. He was like, wait a second. So he failed with the radar, but he invented something completely different. And only to spot that, he went on, tried it with popcorn, and boom, he had the microwave. Sticky notes. The guy who invented it and the company, they tried to find really well-sticking glue. They failed. They got the opposite. It didn't really stick. And after a year, they thought it was a failure and they didn't look at it. But there was this one guy at this company, and he used them for his church book, for singings. Like when he went to sing, to really save them, save the passages that he wanted to look up. Sticky notes. Potato chips. It was invented by a chef because repeatedly one of his customers sent back the potatoes and said, they're too thick. I don't like them. They don't taste good. And after the second or third time, he cut them really thin. He was like, all right, I'm sick of this. I have had enough. Put it in the fryer, put some salt over it, and served it. They liked it. And the list goes on and on. Without failure, there's so many inventions we wouldn't have had. X-ray, cornflakes, penicillin. If you're interested, I encourage you, Google it. It's amazing of how many inventions mankind found due to mistake. I'd like to talk to you about changing perspective. And when we talk about changing perspectives, we as creatives usually get something thrown in our face. Hey, think outside the box. Yeah, sure, I can do totally. I can do that. And I prepared a little something here. And some of you might know it, some of you might not know it, but it's the, whoopsie. It's the 9-box experience challenge. How many of you know it? A few. Oh, that's good. Not that many. So the goal is for this to combine as many boxes, ideally every box, with as little lines as possible without lifting your hand. So, who wants to try it? And you guide my hand. We use some Jedi tricks. But those who don't know it, is anyone up for the challenge? No? I'll start. So the easiest way, what people do, is they go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Simple. You're too advanced for this right now. Can anyone do it with 4 lines? 4 lines? This was 5 lines. Can anyone do it with 4? Maybe even those who know it. Please, guide my hand.
To the right, start in the left top corner.
All right.
Then go right. And now even more right.
Even more?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I want to lift the box.
Real? Oh, okay. Interesting.
And then down and left. And even more. And now go up.
Uh-huh.
Up. And now connect all the other ones. Yeah.
4. Thinking outside the box. Do you think we can do it with 3? Anyone? I'll do it. Do you think I could do it with 1?
Yeah, does it have to be straight?
Yes, it's a straight line. Otherwise, it would be too easy. Who thinks I can do it with 1? I've prepared a little something. It's about changing perspectives. This next thing feels a bit uncomfortable. And I gotta tell you, when I designed this thing and had it on my screen, and there was the word steal, that didn't feel good. Like it's not a word that we really feel good about, but I think it's true for us creatives. We need to steal. And let me tell you a quick story about why I took the seagull. I don't know how many of you ever lived at or spent a lot of time at the coast, but these guys are horrible. Horrible. My daughter was a year old, and she had a cookie. And we were outside, and we were watching a show. And there was like, one of the officials came to us, and she was like, "Be careful with the seagulls and the food." I'm like, yeah. And I swear, the seagull came and took the cookie and went off. I saw it like, coming down, and I tried to protect my daughter, but it's like, cookie was gone. So they steal, we steal. Stealing, and you can call it stealing, you can call it building on other ideas. But ultimately, reinventing the wheel every time, especially at that pace that we are in these days, I don't think that works. I have an interesting an old video from Steve Jobs where he talks about stealing, and I want to show you that.
It comes down to trying to expose yourself to the best things that humans have done, and then try to bring those things in to what you're doing. I mean, Picasso had a saying, he said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." And we have, always been shameless about stealing great ideas. And I think part of what made the Macintosh great was that the people working on it were musicians and poets and artists and zoologists and historians who also happen to be the best computer scientists in the world.
There's a very thin line when it comes to inspiration and stealing, I believe. And it's interesting, especially when we talk about brainstorming, how important it is to build on other ideas. Because if you ideate together, and unless you are a very lonely freelancer, but even then you have people around you, and I always encourage, obviously, to ideate together, but there's a few rules that are critical. And those who know me know that, like, I'm not a big fan of too many rules. In this case, though, I'm super strict, very, very strict, because a brainstorming, an ideation session requires a safe place. Only if you're in that safe place, you allow ideas to come and to contribute. So I think there needs to be 3 rules. The first one, and that's really important, every idea is relevant. If the moderator stands up there and sort of, lets the stickies on the board, and you would not allow them to come by, people will stop because they feel intimidated. Letting every idea go up on the board is crucial. Same goes with judgment. Don't judge within a brainstorming session, because this will chop people down and people will not come with the crazy ideas. They will give you the safe ideas. You don't want the safe ideas. You want the crazy ones. And the more crazy they get, the better, because then you can judge later. But if you don't allow them to come up with these ideas, they will give you the safe ones. And again, here we come back to stealing. You need to build on other ideas. Oftentimes I have found, like in brainstormings, people would not want to build on the idea of this person or this person because they feel like it's something that they belong. But again, if we create a safe place, something where we feel safe to contribute, then we need to allow ourselves to build on other ideas. The last one about how to get inspired, I called Open Your Eyes. And it's one of the projects that I've led at my time at Amazon. And we were told, or we were asked by Mercedes-Benz to advertise the Mercedes E-Class on Amazon. And this was quite a challenge. It was a pitch against, I think it was Twitter and Facebook. So they wanted to go a little different route. But for us specifically, it was difficult because their expectation was, we're just going to sell a car on Amazon. And we're like, that's not going to happen. Because this car is a highly luxurious car. This is roughly 90,000 euros. And our theory was, no one's going to buy that. Like, would you feel comfortable? Just like, yep, I just shopped the $90,000 car, I'm sorry. No, not happening. But we figured we must find a way to get them in the car, to get them to do a test drive, because if they do a test drive, they might like it. And for Amazon, obviously, we knew the targeting. We knew whom to speak to. For instance, the people that buy expensive golf equipment, Mont Blanc pens, watches. We could really target very specifically and give them a premium experience. And then what happened was I was sitting with my team in a cafe. And we were debating, we were thinking, and in that cafe, a lady came and she ordered a to-go coffee. And we looked at it, all of us. We just looked at that. And that lady took the coffee, and it was with paper, which reminded us of Amazon, right? Because that's the paper, the cartage boxes where you receive it. And we were like, man, could we get a prime test drive? So wherever you are, we'll bring the car to you. And the interesting thing was then, like, it could be to you at home, could be at work, could be at a cafe, could be to impress the date you're with, whatever it was. But that prime promise is about trust, it's about speed. And that's what we incorporated with this. We had a few difficulties in Germany with the fleet, but this was a international campaign that took off and was quite successful, which was interesting because I'm 100% convinced that this wouldn't have happened if we hadn't sat at this place at that specific amount of time with eyes closed. We had to have them open. And I think this is similar to what David Lynch said in the video. Ideas can come from anywhere, but you need to open your eyes and you need to allow them to come to you and actually recognize them as ideas. So, I'd like to talk to you about the why. So, I think we understand the what. Remember our process and when it happens. And now we talked a lot about some techniques of how to get inspired. But let's just take a few moments to understand the why of inspiration, why we should be inspired or inspire others. We as creatives, we're tasked with a lot, every day. We need to invent and pioneer, like Nikola Tesla. We need to think outside the box, like Einstein. And we need to be a leader like Gandhi. I mean, I obviously picked, really important people in this world. And I think you get it, right? It's about what they did. And when I made that presentation, I thought it's actually interesting to see whom inspired them or what inspired them. Gandhi was driven and inspired by literature. Einstein by philosophy. And just think of what he proved wrong, what that inspiration did to us. Tesla was driven by competition. I guess my point is, whatever drives you, whatever inspires you, you need to go out and find it. And now take a moment to look at these three people, at these three faces, and think whom they inspired. Inspired the world. That's huge. I always wonder whether they were aware of the amount of responsibility they had with this. But nonetheless, this was huge and still is huge. So I think, to sum up my speech, I think inspiration is a critical need, because otherwise you won't be able to do what you do on a daily basis. But I also think that inspiration is a privilege. And obviously, this is just a presentation. Oopsie. Obviously, this is just a presentation. But your privilege as creatives awaits the day when you walk out that door. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dom. Don't sit down yet.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let's open the floor to some questions.
Oh, of course.
I think, don't worry.
Yeah.
I personally have been hugely inspired by the talk. I want to go out there and redefine what I wrote on the sticker, where I find inspiration. Let's see if there are any questions for Dom. Please, go ahead.
With the people that you work with in your team,
Yeah.
Do you make it a point of conversation to find out what inspires them and how they get inspired so that you can work better together?
Usually we do that. Yeah, we usually do that in one-on-ones, where we sort of find that source of inspiration. But ultimately, I think it's about them to come up with this. And I mean, any of us knows, a certain type of place, a certain type of mindset that they need to come in to get inspired. For me, still, it is drawing. That's why I started up with my Dressler drawings. But ultimately, I think it's about the manager to encourage. But then in the end, it's about the individual themselves to seek it out. Please.
Do you find that you're differently inspired depending on what language you're working in or thinking in?
That's very interesting. Actually, I haven't thought about that. I thought about it. That's interesting. I thought about it this morning because I think it's way easier to present in front of an US audience. They are more cheerful and they are more thing. But since I'm German, I know how to deal with it. But I have had a lot of US colleagues that were a little off when they first presented in front of a German crowd. No, but I think inspiration again comes in many ways, and I worked with a Latin American team, and their spirit was completely different. Especially when I look around here, the Dia de los Muertos, the colors were perceived completely differently. So yes, I think there is something. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. please.
Thank you, John, for your really inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
And my question is how to understand that you think differently,
Yeah.
especially when we work with creative people.
Can you say the last part again?
Especially when we work with creative people.
How to understand when to think differently?
Differently, yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. I mean, ultimately, when we take that example of Boris and Agassi, I think his usual way would have been like to watch VHS tapes, right? And then after that, going to the court and just smashing out the balls as much as he could. But I think whenever you understand that an approach you take is different than the approaches you took before, I think that's when you go into a state of mind where you think like, yep, I'm thinking differently. And I think it's about reflecting that with your team. And again, it comes back to the safe place. Only then you're allowed, if you're in that safe place, you're allowed to think differently. And I think you're being applauded as well. Thank you. Please.
I've seen lately as an inspiration advice for teams, creative or not, but basically to take everyone into one direction. I'll give you the example of the New Zealand rugby team, the All Blacks. They're World Cup, I think, right now in Japan. They do this haka. It's a dancing. When you see it, you almost see the energy. Yeah. And it's actually the whole thing goes into another level. They become a whole to something greater than a team itself and individuals. Yeah. Do you think that's something that could apply in creative field, and that, or if you suggest something, because inspiration for individuals is one thing, and to find something that could inspire and take the whole to a greater thing is another dimension.
Yeah, I think it's giving them purpose then, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Because if you think about it, like, and especially what's been really big in the United States is to really live the core values of a company and really cherish them. They hire based on their core values. They make presentation based on their core values. They make decision based on their core values. So the first thing that happened to me when I was hired by a US company, I just got all these leadership principles and I'm like, oh man, this is weird. Because for us, from a cultural perspective, we don't do that yet. More and more we do it, but that sort of thing felt almost like a religion for us at first, or for me at first. I do think, though, that if you hire based on that and you get the people with the right mindset and they really believe in that, they believe in that purpose, I think this takes you to a different direction and into something you haven't thought before. But I must say that I feel it's difficult at first to really encompass that into your daily work.
I'd like to share an idea that I have about thinking differently. Sometimes it's like looking through a camera with the lens focused. So when you're looking at a problem or something that you have to create, so it's like very focused. And then when you zoom back and it sort of becomes blurry, then you can look at other things and then it helps to come around to a new idea.
That's an interesting one. Do you know when you look at the stars and you on purpose don't look at the actual thing, but you look away, and then the side view of your eyes actually catches it? I think that's a similar thing. Yeah, I agree. Any other questions, call outs?
Have you ever experienced a creative burnout, and how?
Oh, creative burnout. I think in every creative process, that's the panic phase at the bottom. Yes, and I think, I don't know if you feel the same, but like that blank canvas can be very, very frightening. And ultimately, I encourage people to step away from that white canvas, excuse me, to find inspiration. I think also when we talked about failure, what I try to do is like, I don't erase all the stuff that led me to my current point. And I might take a look at them with fresh eyes. So for instance, when you do a painting course, like a drawing course, I don't know how many of you made a drawing course, the first thing you learn is not to erase the lines, the bad lines in the first place. And it has a reason, because these lines will ultimately guide you to the right direction, and they will inspire you or show you the way. But I think it helps a different thing. It also gets rid of that white canvas that I feel pretty panicky about. So yes.
Should we take one last question?
One last.
Who wants to?
I have a question.
Oh.
It's not only Germany, I think. I'm coming from Hungary, and I think this Eastern Bloc was also really hard on failure.
Mm-hmm.
And why cannot we fail? Why our culture cannot deal with failure or teach us how to fail?
I have no idea.
Really?
I have no idea.
We had like such a strong generation.
I agree. I think it is so encompassed into our culture that I like. Oftentimes when people say like, oh yeah, failing is good, failing is easy. No, it's not, especially not for us. What I saw at Amazon, what they do is like they cherish people that failed. They put them on stage and they give them an award for failure. And they asked me, it's like, Dom, do you think we could do it in German? I'm like, no. Absolutely not. You can't. Why? No, you can't do it. Maybe you can in a few years, or maybe in decades, I don't know. But for some reason, this is part of our culture. And if anyone else has a few thoughts on that, I would love to hear them. But I have to say, I don't understand it.
Then I would say thank you, Dom.
Thank you very much.
We're staying here a little bit longer. Dom will be hanging around as well. So please feel free to not just rush to your work, have some more coffee, have some more muesli or fruits. I'm super thankful that you guys came. I hope you got inspired and that your Friday started in a great way. Our next session is going to be an October session, so the last Friday in October. The topic is going to be flow, so a little bit different than news. We will have a great location, so if you're not subscribed to our newsletter yet, subscribe so that you are the first ones to know when the next event is coming up. And otherwise, thank you, Dom.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, the location. Have a great Friday.